Hello to everyone, and today we welcome in our studio a great person and a very talented and experienced person from France. We have here Martin Duplantier, who is running a foundation of architecture of France, president of this foundation, and experienced architect and I would say urban planner, who came to Lviv, who came to Ukraine, works with our governments and architects to do something good. Martin, why did you come to Ukraine?
Well, actually, first I thank you for inviting me to this conversation, to this talk. I came to Ukraine because when you see such an invasion, such a war, just from the screen, you probably don't understand properly what the challenges are and what the emergency is. And as I was very linked to Ukraine before the war, I really wanted to see how we could actually help, because what you're doing now is actually impressive. It's also defending the idea of freedom, the idea of democracy, and the idea of Europe. And this is our duty to make everything we can to help you in this task against totalitarian and fascist power. So on my small scale and my small role of architect and urban designer, I thought there would be something to do on the very short term, probably also on the longer term, but I think the emergency now is really on the short term, and that's why I came with in my backpack a few foundations, French foundations, who told me, hey Martin, we should do something for Ukraine. We're ready to help. We are ready to help on different matters, educational matters, heritage matters, housing matters. So that's my task, to come, meet, listen, observe, and then bring this testimony back to France, share it, gather the resources, and act very rapidly, because time goes on and we have to act in the coming weeks and months.
Did you go on this trip to different cities of Ukraine? Did you see this destruction of the cities?
Yes, of course. I didn't go up to Donbass, but I've been to the Kiev area. I met the deputy mayor of Bucha. I met the mayor of Irpin. Then we went to the region of Chernihiv, where I met your vice prime minister. Some mayors of small villages who've been entirely demolished. I met also the governor of Chernihiv, and I met the Archbishop also about heritage and
Archbishop
churches.
Sidoslav.
Yes. So it's been a very intense time for me, and great, and let's say emotional moments as well for me. That was the first time I was coming to Ukraine after the invasion, and let's say I have everything now in my head to come back and to gather and federate all the resources needed.
Everyone is talking today about rebuilding of Ukraine, about reconstruction, rebuilding, and about future new cities being rebuilt after they will be again deoccupied. But some people say that it's not the right time to talk about it because we are in a war, and maybe let's leave it for later. What's your opinion on that?
Well, my opinion is that it's everything that we can do and anticipate is right, is good. From the French perspective, we've never done so many mistakes as we did right after the war, the Second World War, when we rebuilt French cities. We did it in the state of emergency. We did it too rapidly without thinking really where we wanted to go and what kind of urban fabric, new districts we would build. And I think it's important for sure to dedicate all of your and our resources to the emergency, to the short term, to this war, to protecting the populations, and of course, but to think about the day after tomorrow when Ukraine will be freed. It's a simultaneous effort that is needed, because otherwise we won't probably project the right kind of Ukrainian city that everyone is expecting. Everyone has a different idea of what this Ukrainian city, of post-war city, will be. Well, let's share that. Let's already try to think about it. We're not dedicating resources. The only resources we're bringing is brains, is thinking about it, anticipating things, and trying to make sure that we find the right ingredients of what Ukrainian identity in the city is. What is it? I don't know. I have to share that. We have to talk about it.
So you don't know. You don't have a solution.
I don't have a proper solution. Of course not. We don't do the cities from Paris, New York, or Tokyo. We do it together. We do it as in a partnership, in a daily basis, with strong discussions, probably also some oppositions. But this is normal, and I think it would be good to anticipate things and to make people aware that there will be soon plans coming, and we have to get people around the table to make these plans together, so that it's everyone's plan. It's not your plan, my plan, his plan. No, it's everyone's plan.
So who should participate in these conversations? Of course, maybe not everyone, not all citizens can do it, but who should be for sure in these discussions, except government?
Yeah, they are the decision makers at the end. But I think what you've been doing in your media is the right thing, to bring people together, different expertises, to share the fields, because the urban ecosystem is something that is it's a soft science. It's not a hard science. A lot of disciplines actually interact, and it's good to have the opinion of a lot of different fields and experts. On the other hand, at a certain moment, there will be a need of proposals, and these proposals will probably and surely have to be shared with a larger range of people, and probably the citizens themselves, to communicate, to understand what their needs from the bottom up. The bottom up strategy is also something that needs to come and to be developed in this strategy. So there is a clear route to be designed, and a method to be also set, to make sure everyone has expresses its own opinion, and that we can have a shared project.
Do you think there should be a single model created for rebuilding all the cities, for example, Kyiv, Bucha, Irpin, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, or these should be totally different cities? And how this identity, because it's very interesting that you said about Ukrainian identity, putting them inside this vision of rebuilding. Because when we talk to architects here, we often don't, we rarely hear this, and it's interesting to hear from you.
What I would suggest is the Soviet approach, which is not a copy-paste approach. It's a contextual approach. Every city will have its own identity, and it's good so, because it has its own surroundings, it has its own history, its own heritage. And of course, there's no sense of copy pasting. So that means we have to probably have the same methodology, the same method, the same approach of how to gather and federate people. But the projects will be all different because the needs will be different. The identity of the place is different from Chernihiv to Bucha to Mariupol and of course to Lviv. So yes, different answers with the same toolbox, the same tools.
Let's talk a little bit more deeply about architecture itself. What is architecture? Is it something for people? Because sometimes we feel it's like that is something that shapes the urban planning, or just I don't know, or permissions to build. Is it something more deeper? And what is architecture in a few words, if we can say?
Architecture is first, the first sense of architecture is to protect the body, is to protect, it's the extension of your clothes at a larger scale. And this war shows us how important architecture is. What is the thickness of this protection? How the double wall strategy, how the shelters protect me. So architecture is first this hard shell, this protection for our lives, for our bodies. But architecture is also a moment of culture. It's also what we want to say with this, how we use these spaces. So this is culture, and this is the sense of the people living there, what the sense of their lives, the sense of their community. And this is why, actually, when I looked at these first days of invasion, I thought Russians would actually want to annihilate Ukrainian culture and Ukrainian architecture. And that's why by tackling heritage issues, it's also a way to say we protect Ukrainian identity, we protect Ukrainian culture, and we look ahead, we look forward, because if you don't have any history in your back, well, it's very hard to project a common future.
So you mean the buildings that are centuries old buildings in all different cities of Ukraine, architectural heritage has been speaking, as you say, to us. And now, do I understand correctly that Russia and Putin want to make us silent, like they were trying to do this almost a century ago when they made a Holodomor genocide in Ukraine? Is this also shelling the architectural buildings, churches, and other institutions, theaters? Is it also a part of it making us silent strategy?
Exactly, that's a tool for them to do the tabula rasa, to make sure that Ukrainian identity doesn't exist anymore, and they'll be able, that's what they're doing in Mariupol, right? They're already starting to rebuild. If you build and say, hey, that's us, and only us, and everything is Russian. That's their strategy. So it's urgent to protect everything we can in terms of heritage, and to make sure that this cultural background is actually protected and rebuilt and regenerated.
How we can do it good and effectively? What is needed right now?
For example, I was yesterday in Chernihiv, and we visited the first museum of Ukrainian history that was built in 1876, that was shelled a few months ago in March. And it's very bizarre that actually Russians are randomly shelling on civilians, but when they want to hit a certain target, and this is a cultural heritage target on Ukrainian history, they hit it very precisely. So this building, we will rebuild it, and we will make sure Ukrainian history is back into this museum, but this museum became a library, a biblioteca, a library in with ancient books. Anyway, it's a testimony of your cultural heritage, so we'll rebuild it.
Two modern instruments may help us to rebuild it so that we will really feel it's the same, and that this architecture, rebuilt architecture, will speak the same language.
So then we're talking about something else. We're talking about the tools for reconstruction of a building.
Mm-hmm.
How do we do this? With which expertise? And if we want to rebuild as is exactly was, or should we still, like for example the Charlottenburg, the Kudamm church in Berlin shows the stigmas of the war. That's something that needs to be,
mm-hmm.
Put on the
Mm-hmm.
table. For now, I would say if we want to rebuild as it was, then we have the tools for it, and of course, modern and digitalized tools might help us. But what is mostly needed is to have good craftsmanship and a good sense of what a plaster is, how the bricks are set, all of that. And I'm sure in Ukraine you have great craftsmen. If they're not fighting, we will have to, for sure, do some further schools of craftsmanship to get this know-how back among many people.
Great. So, and that's where your foundation is also aimed to work with.
Sure. I didn't tell you this before, but that's true. We're working on this topic, exactly on this challenge of getting people back to handwork and know-how and the historical know-how. Yes.
Great. Getting a little bit from war to just Ukraine and Ukrainian cities. How do you see, you've been to different cities of Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
how do you see they are being developed in terms of urban planning? And what do you think is good and what should be improved? And may we use this war as a chance to build better cities, to build the cities of the future where all Ukrainians who are staying now abroad because they have to, they have nowhere to live,
Mm-hmm.
because they lost their homes, where would come back, would
Mm-hmm.
like to come back.
I think the in my view, which is an external view, but you have real good assets, which are your cities are in general very green. Your cities have usually a historical network of public transport. That's something basically very good that we need to, of
Make
course,
modern.
amplify and develop. And your cities have usually a historical center, not always. But your cities as well have a lack of mixity of functions. That means a district where you can find housing, you can find small factories, you can find office spaces, you can find retail, etc. The 15-minute city, where you live from your flat and 15 minutes away from walking distance, you find everything. I think the Ukrainian cities are lacking of. But that's maybe that's only my personal opinion. And this is something that we could develop in the future projections of your cities. We could amplify nature, amplify the green dimension, and the split of the public space. Today, Ukrainian public space is mainly dedicated to cars. How do we do to split it in a different way so that pedestrians, so that bicycles, so that public transport take a larger share, and how do we do to actually implement more natural elements, trees and so on. And then there is a great talk, but this is one by one process of the urban fabric. What kind of urban fabric do we want to see, and how do we implement the polarities? Should they be along the tramway lines, along the metro lines, along the public transport? Should they be somewhere else? What kind of heights do we accept? What kind of all of that, with a sustainable glance, which is in terms of materialities, in terms of recycling everything that has been demolished for now. We have, we really have tools to actually recycle most of the rubbles that are being thrown away at the moment. We know how to recycle that. And we should do this. We should maybe not do this today, but tomorrow. So stock it somewhere. And this is the first material for tomorrow's city.
Have you been talking about that with local governments or Ukrainian governments, or because so that it's not being just thrown away, but really kept for?
Yeah, they're saying that they're putting them in some different places, and but most of it is actually put on the side, on the ground, and etc. So we won't be able to take it again. I understand it's an emergency. It's a state of emergency.
Do you think all these elements that you mentioned, public transport development, like limiting heights, using
or not limiting,
yeah. Like all these elements of urban planning, should they be building better cities? May they be done separately as separate elements, part by part, or is it something that should be done as a one single strategy at the same time together?
To me, it should be all together. An ecosystem works only because the different parts of the ecosystem of the body actually function together. So this is a global vision that we have to have, and probably after this global vision, we can zoom in on different parts of the city and then dedicate time to this or that part that has been more demolished than the other one, and where we need to put some more efforts and more precisely go into the project. But yes, there is a need of interdisciplinary approach.
You've been working as an architect mainly in Paris and Bordeaux, and when we talked with you, so probably many other cities, but I think Paris and Bordeaux should be probably most close to you. And you said that Paris is the city with the biggest density in the world, which I wouldn't feel.
One of them,
one of the most. Okay, that Paris is a city that is one of the most densest city in the world. But when you walk or drive through Paris, you don't feel it. How may it be achievable?
That's exactly the kind of discussion we need to have with people, with different experts, because the idea of density is something different from just having skyscrapers or just having tall buildings. The idea of density can be, and that's the job of architects, can be set in different ways. And the Haussmannian urban fabric is clearly very dense, but one might say it's very enjoyable. I can walk and have something around me. I can go to the brasserie downstairs. I can get my baguette over there. I have friends all around. I see the sky and maybe the greenery not that much, but it doesn't matter because I have something else. And clearly, this is one of the models, but it's not the only one. Then you have Singapore, which is on a completely different urban fabric model, which is more skyscrapers and greenery all around. But if you have only skyscrapers and no greenery, then then you've lost everything, and you have only car park in the outdoors, which would be terrible. But Singapore put an emphasis on planting and bringing nature back, because when you look at the pictures in 1961 of the independence, and now it doesn't have anything to do. So their first priority was to bring nature back, and they've managed. So that's another example of a model that could be developed. And I think Ukraine should have its own model.
But it means that strategy should be the first, strategy and
Yes.
vision,
Mm-hmm.
and then small steps. In terms of density that we mentioned, I would also like to get to the question of IDPs. We are
Mhm.
having so many internally displaced people now in Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and of course most of them are in Western Ukraine now. How do you see what would be the right solution? Because we are seeing really different solutions, like building like blocks, like which look like ghettos sometimes, for housing all these people. And sometimes some people say that, oh, we should build as soon as possible, as cheap as possible, but that doesn't mean a good housing. And some experts say that no, we need to build something better, not to do something just for temporarily. What's your opinion?
My opinion is that building as cheap as possible and as fast as possible has brought many countries to huge errors that is still paying 60 years later, just like in France, as we did in 1945 up to 1960, where we developed some grands ensembles, and it's still a big problem. So emergency housing is something very, very difficult to tackle. I would say one of the solutions could be indeed to build proper housing, because we know that a part of these people that moved from the eastern part of Ukraine to Lviv will stay here even after
Mm-hmm.
the war.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that will be an increase in the population. So there will be a need of housing, and then I think it's good to build in a proper way. Two, let's say the rest of the people could be. We should probably look at the actual buildings, the semi-industrial buildings. How could we renovate or arrange in some ways some of the existing buildings into housing for temporary housing? This costs less. This is not a problem over time, because we know that if we have to rearrange them in 2 or 3 years, they will still be worth something. But just by stacking prefab modules on top of each other, and to say that's the solution, this is usually very painful afterwards, and even not good during the time of stay, because these structures are not done for comfort. They're done just for the sake of it, and then it's a waste of resources. So to sum up, yes to real housing, and to actually restoring probably industrial or some kind of other buildings that are not in use today, and that we could turn into housing.
Great, thank you. And at the end, I would like to ask about my native city, about Lviv. We often hear from okay, not often, but sometimes people say that, oh, Lviv is a small Paris. What do you think about it? And what's your impression of our city as a city of heritage, but also as a modern city?
Well, Lviv is certainly very beautiful, maybe more beautiful than Paris. No, it's a very interesting city, because you have the different periods of time in different parts of the city, the different districts that really tell the story of the city. And I appreciate this very much. I also like a lot the way that it's a walkable city. So that's also something that's an ingredient for tomorrow's Ukrainian identity. I think that it's something that you should be able to export to other parts of Ukraine. And then what was the other part of your question?
How do you see the city how do you see Lviv as a heritage city, but also as a modern city? And what do you see really good here, but what should be improved?
Yeah.
From perspectives of urban planning.
Yeah, well, and in the future, again, I think Lviv has to look at its own assets and identity and try to think about the new districts, not doing copy pasting, but rather really having a global approach on a neighborhood, on a district, and see how could this be the heritage of the 21st century. In a few centuries, people will want to live there because it's the heritage of this 21st century, as this historical center is, as the extension by the Austrian Empire was. You know, all of these steps in the city tell the story of the city, and I think today we're in a time of another page of this story, and we should really take our responsibilities to create quality. Create urban quality.
Do you think it's easy or tough?
I think it's nothing is impossible, and if we want it all together, we'll make it happen. Yeah.
Great. I think that's a great end for our interview for today. I'm sure we will have. I hope that we will have more conversations in the future, because that's the topic of city development is something what is quite big, but I'm very thankful for your expertise and sharing it with us, and thank you for what you're doing for Ukraine.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Дякую.
Дякую.